Welcome to a very long overdue episode of In a Fairfield Minute. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Seeing you.
Good to see you guys too.
Feel like it's been in like literally an eternity.
I know it has. I mean, that we're the boys are ending seventh grade. I mean, like the fact that Jack and like they're going into eighth grade. I don't. They were in kindergarten yesterday.
It
Right?
is literally feels like they were in kindergarten yesterday. I
It's
struggle
the
with that like
trend.
every day too, though, to be
I
honest with
do. I know. I do too. It hurts my heart every day because I'm like, how I think COVID, there was like a blip of time, right? Where we didn't see anybody. But it was funny. My youngest is 6 and he's playing baseball, like the same age that like when our kids were playing. And we'd be like, baseball ready, get base. And now I don't even say anything. I'm like, it's like let's
I remember that, right? Because I
yeah.
was the coach.
Yep.
I
Yep.
remember all that. And now our youngest is 8. So like, and going into 3rd grade, which is when like the shutdown happened for
Yep.
our oldest,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's like a really big mind mess.
It is. It is. I agree with you completely.
And I think COVID kind of I blacked out those years almost. Like it was
Yeah.
it's no, it's I don't think and everyone you talk to has the same exact like thing, right? They're like, we know we were there.
Exactly. Yes, I know, but we weren't making like the same memories and things and seeing people. So it was crazy, crazy time for everybody.
Oh, and the fact that it was years of our
Yeah,
life, significant, and our kids do a lot of growing in those years. So I feel like now it's like the realization and especially
totally.
the older ones, the voice drops,
Yeah.
voice. So like with the voice changes and all like
Yeah. Are you guys
obviously the
experiencing
attitude.
that as well?
Not as much. I mean, Jack just surpassed me in height, which is weird because I'm like not tiny. I'm 5'7".
That,
So I was not prepared for that moment where he's like, let's measure ourselves. And I was like, what? You're taller than me. But
So welcome everybody. This is Maggie Lord, again, a dear friend of ours from a while back from our kids growing up. I met Maggie when she was working on her own entrepreneurial business called Rustic Wedding Chic, which blew up. We're going to talk about all this and like her adventure with that amazing business and where it has taken her today. So Maggie, welcome. We're so happy to have you on the podcast. I think you have an incredible story to tell and some amazing insights to share, especially for entrepreneurs out there, for women entrepreneurs also trying to make it in this business, which in this world, which has its challenges. So welcome. We're so happy to have you.
thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So I guess let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about Rustic Wedding Chic, because at least that's where I see it kind of starting. Would love to just kind of pick your brain about how you began in your industry and your adventure with that.
Yeah, I always tell people I kind of became the owner of a large media company by accident. I was 26 at the time. Was finishing up my master's degree. I was teaching part-time. And I've always loved the romance and beauty around weddings, but I was in this process of I'd gotten engaged to my husband. And if you go back all those years to 2008, we're talking no Pinterest, no Instagram. So you really had the wedding world was about wedding magazines and taking, those pictures and sharing them with your vendors. There was a small crop of what was back then just considered just a blog, right? So it was like the early days of wedding blogs and people were sharing ideas and inspiration, but there was only a handful of them at the time. And I was planning this long distance wedding because we lived in Connecticut, but we were getting married in northern Wisconsin. And I was struggling to communicate with our vendors. It just was too hard. And, there was no iPhone. Like I was like taking blurry pictures with like my BlackBerry on like, from like wedding magazines. It wasn't great. And so I started realizing that I couldn't find inspiration online in this rustic niche that I was getting married in. And if I was struggling to find it, I knew other people were. So I started finding wedding photographers who had beautiful images on their website to showcase their work and their past weddings that they had photographed. And I would contact them and say, your images are so pretty. Can I put them on this little blog that I started called Rustic Wedding Chic? And, we'll credit you and link to you. And it just turned into a thing where it was huge. We had like instant readership because the SEO in that day was so organic. If you typed in rustic wedding anything, there was no competition. So we came up everywhere as number one.
Think about it now, just from like, you know, if we put our like digital media hats on or digital marketing hats on, like it's so competitive from a keyword perspective, and to go into that scenario and not have to compete on that level, like that's amazing. I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was right. It was at the time where the market now is so saturated to try to break through and like any one of those niches, right? Whether it's wedding or it's like home decor or parenting lifestyle would be really, really competitive and hard. So what I didn't realize that I was building really was a media company. I just thought I was like sharing fun ideas, and our readership was there instantly. And I had to kind of like scramble and figure out, okay, how do I really organize this so that we're providing not just pretty pictures, but resources and ideas, you know, and connecting them with vendors, which we did eventually a couple of years down the road. And I was like, how do I monetize this? Right? Like it wasn't really being done.
People in that world like all day long.
Yeah.
We
Right.
we
It's so
it's
It's tough.
it's
It's tough. Yeah. And I love how it's like, you know, I love how you started like literally like with the simple, like the art of just asking and being able to like reach out to someone and build a connection with someone and be like you said, hey, I love what you're doing. You know, I'm just trying to plan my wedding. And then all of a sudden, like it just organically grows, the interest grows. Did you find that people were asking you for resources or your suggestions on other kinds of weddings that weren't rustic necessarily, but like, did you get inquiries to like grow and expand in different avenues? And did you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I actually didn't realize at the time I was planning this very rustic chic wedding, obviously why I kind of named the blog that. But rustic was like an overall term for brides that encompassed farm, vineyard, barn, backyard, garden. So like I would have brides who would find us, they're like, I'm planning a beautiful outdoor wedding on Nantucket, and brides in Michigan who were getting married in a barn. So we really serviced a large type of style of bride. I was fielding so many emails from brides who would be like, do you know of a suggestion of a venue in Illinois, California? And I was like, oh, you know, I don't. And so I created this whole column on the site called Ask Maggie and was fielding tons and tons of emails. And that's when we built our vendor directory as a way to service both those vendors who were in our niche, but also the bride who didn't want to spend hours combing through the knot, right? She knew she wanted a rustic venue. So we were able to diversify our revenue stream and take it from just ad sales to a revenue stream with vendors as well.
That's awesome. And then like, what was the timeline from you? Obviously, you're planning your wedding, you're building out your blog, and not even realizing to your, you know, like you mentioned, like this amazing media group, and like, what was the timeline of that?
Yeah, so we got engaged of July of 2008, and I started Rustic Wedding Chic in like August of 2008. John and I got married in August 2009. And so that first year of planning my wedding, we developed our readership, which was crazy. And so by the time we got married, it was a full-fledged business. Like it was my main job. It was like I didn't realize how quickly we were going to be able to grow. And not only did the brides need us, but if you think back to wedding photographers didn't have a way to get featured as much or showcase their work besides their own website, because there wasn't as many blogs. So their goal was still to get into wedding magazines, but that was very competitive and hard. So we set up a submission process where a photographer or a wedding planner could share their bride's photos and the whole story, and we would feature them, which we called like real weddings. And we quickly, I think like the month after I launched our submission process, we would have like 200 to 250 submissions a month to choose from. Yeah, I know.
We got married in 2008, and the only access we had outside of like for Palo was magazines. I mean, I'm the you know, I'm along for the ride.
Yeah.
I remember we'd
It
go to
was-
or conventions, like we went to a couple conventions, but
Yeah.
like kind of interesting to see where the internet was then and where it is now. And it's like on steroids, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and they still have some of those large wedding, shows that they put on, and it was a way for a vendor. But I had a lot of brides who were planning more of a destination or something wedding, so they needed to connect with vendors where they were getting married, which was different than if like I'm just getting married in my hometown. I think what changed the game when Pinterest became part of the experience for brides, we jumped on Pinterest extremely early on, before there was even Pinterest business. Like Rustic Wedding Chic had like a personal account until they launched business a couple of years later. And our traffic like quadrupled, because at those days of Pinterest, slightly different than how it's set up today. If you wanted to see more of the picture, you had to click through to the source. So a bride would see a beautiful picture of a barn wedding, and she'd click on it, it would automatically direct her to Rustic Wedding Chic. Our traffic skyrocketed. That was at the point where I was like, I need a team. Like, I cannot just continue to do this alone.
That's going to be my next question, because like, I mean, like we're saying, like we're a team of two, right? Trying to, build our business and whatever. It really, just like you say, like it takes a village in life. Like it takes a village, it takes a network, it takes a community in business, So at what point, did you start feeling that need to expand, and how does one take that step? Because it's, there's so many questions. I feel like when you're a small business owner, especially when it's like ours is like, ground up. It is grassroots, it is DIY, it is our vision that we're simply trying to grow. And I feel like it's always taking that step from like, I have a nice idea. Ooh, it's taking off. People love it. Yay. And then it's like, how do I monetize this? And how do I build a team to help support growth as a true, a true business?
that must have been overwhelming for you to just, because like you like what you almost walked into a hornet's nest, right? A positive hornet's nest, but a hornet's nest nonetheless.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think the thing, looking back on it, it was a little bit easier than if I was starting it today, because we got to add the social components as they developed, as opposed to now, if you launch something, you have to launch Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Facebook was a thing. So we had the blog, and then we had the Facebook community that kind of went along with it. But we were able to then add in Pinterest. And then when Instagram came out, we were able to layer that in. I knew that I couldn't be good at everything, right? I was like, I had the vision, I handled all the editorial at the time. And so I kind of built a small, like I had a tech advisor who I would bring in when I needed to like build out, when this website needed to get bigger and better and more features. And I for the entire time that I ran Rustic Wedding Chic, I really oversaw and wrote 95% of all the editorial content, because that was important to me. That was the standard. And it wasn't, I hired some people to help, and I was like, I wouldn't have chosen that photo. They didn't tell a good enough story that's going to hook the bride. And so I started to realize like there were areas, ad sales, not my thing, right? I'm a creative person, right? So it was easier for me to help and get someone to bring in like part-time, to just help with some ad sales and those sort of things. But it was really seeing the areas that we needed help. And then like when we launched the vendor directory, that was a whole other hornet's nest, because now we have thousands of vendors who are joining. Some are joining for free, some are upgrading to our paid placement, and someone has to continue to, who's paying, what it's like, and so it was easy to kind of spot where I needed to bring in help based on the growth of the company. So I do think I was lucky that I was able to like launch something, and as we grew, bring in the support. Whereas now I think if I was going to launch a brand new business, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to need support here and here and here and here. And that's overwhelming, because I think a lot of companies, they hire too soon.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the hardest parts, is like, as you're starting up, you know, the money isn't always there. The funding isn't always there to support all the stuff that you know you need help with, right? You want to be able to get that intern. You want to be able to, you know, get that strategist in, or whoever it is, right? That you might need, that might be right for whatever it is you're working on. But sometimes, you know, you do have to, I'm sure you had to go out of pocket at some point to support until you had the fund, you know, it's like
Yeah.
years. And I think a lot of small business owners, and we feel it too, you know, it's just like, you know, you kind of hit a roadblock, or you hit this like, and you're afraid to take those next steps, you know?
Yeah.
So
No, that's true. I agree. And we were lucky. I mean, I launched Rustic Wedding Chic with $1,600 of my own money. I got like a hand-drawn logo designed by an artist that I was following that I thought was really cool. The tech fees at that time was really simple. Like we set up a WordPress blog. There wasn't a lot that we had to pay for, and we never took on funding. The company was able to generate revenue because we were small enough, right? The company could survive on its revenue until it, and then it grew. And so once we got to this very kind of large spot, I was like, well, I could go out and get funding, or I could just continue to see if there's other revenue streams that we could bring in. And that was when I got a licensing deal for the company, and we licensed our name to product, wedding related product and stationery. I got a publishing deal and wrote 6 books through that process. And so that was a revenue stream. So I was always very proud of the fact that we were able to really run a successful tech company, media company, without having to bring on big funding.
It gives you the opportunity to do what you want. You don't have to answer to people and have kind of people like, because I mean, I work in the tech space. So I've worked in like tech sales for, I don't know, probably 10 years. And I've worked for the Groupons of the world and stuff like that. So I'm not super familiar with like funding and like that, but I do understand the process. And it makes my brain hurt, and I don't I barely understand it. But I don't know. For me with sales, right? Like in any business, and I tell Pal all the time, and you might, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm a big component of just do the work and the money will come. I've learned when you chase money, it does not come. But if you like, even with what we do within a Fairfield Minute, and we've certainly had like our highs and our lows, and we still do, we're still very young, and it's still very kind of like a baby of ours. But like when Palette starts getting like panicky, or even myself, like I just remind us, I'm like, just create content. Because if we focus on creating content, and you focus on like also being of service to others, like the rest will come full circle at some point or another. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that. Like, how do you feel about that approach?
No, I that's always where I've come from. I've been an entrepreneur since I can remember. I mean, my first business was Maggie's Shell Shop when I was 6. And I realized if I went to the Maggie Shell Shop, if I went to the beach and collected shells, free inventory, I could sell them to people and make a profit. But so it's just, I mean, I had Maggie's puffy paint business in 2nd grade, and I puffy painted everyone's binder. Like it's always been there. So I agree with you. If you do something that you enjoy, money will come. I think what happens is when it's the other way around, even if it's a great idea, but you're chasing the big money, the big payout, you lose that passion at somewhere through that process. And I didn't want to take on a lot of funding because I didn't want a board of directors. I didn't want to have to ask a million people if I could do something with my own company. And I knew at some point I might look to exit, and I didn't want to have to pay everybody else out before I saw any of that, based on how hard, I had worked. And I was scrappy at certain points, being in Fairfield, I was able to utilize, I had interns from Fairfield University that were extremely interesting, young, driven. I had, 2 women helping me. They were fantastic. And they were able to add benefit of bringing ideas to the table from a different perspective, yet they were getting credit, and the company didn't have to shell out, funds that we didn't have.
Exactly.
That's
We
awesome.
love doing that too. Like we've had great experiences tapping into the local universities and everything. I think that's a wonderful way to look at it.
Even the high schools, like I have a friend of mine from high school at Ward, and he reaches out to me every now and then and says, hey, listen, like we have some kids who are entrepreneurs. They want to know if they can do some sort of, and we brought on some really, really smart young kids that are driven. And I just think like, that's awesome. Like, I love that. I love in my space, like I love mentoring kids where, I was an ADHD kid. I didn't find my path until well into my late 30s and 40s. And that's challenging because like when you spend a good lot of your life not knowing like what you're good at or what your just direction in general, it could be very frustrating and very daunting. And, you know, it eventually it kind of works, it runs you down. So I love the idea of working with interns from, you know, high school and college and just, you know, helping them find their way. So I love that you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was also interesting that like when I went to college, there was no entrepreneurial studies as a major. I mean, if there had been, I would have been a much happier, you know, person through college. And if you read most job descriptions now, even if it's the most corporate job, they always say entrepreneurial minded. That's who they're looking for. And what does that mean? It means they're looking for someone who is willing to wear several hats, go outside their job description, be scrappy, think outside the box. And so it's so funny to me that now like every job is like, oh, we're looking for someone entrepreneurial. I'm like, of course, because it just means that you're going to get someone who's willing to jump in and face lots of, you know, choices and changes throughout the course of whatever job that they're doing.
A lot of those people are in many ways like unicorns. Because I mean, again, I've worked for a lot of tech companies and you see different people come on board where I can tell once I meet someone who's driven and who has the work ethic to grind it out. And I hate the word grind it out because you shouldn't have to, like, you should be working to live, not living to work, right? And that's a very delicate balance, especially like in our country, in our part of the world, particularly. Like the Northeast is like both coasts actually are really like huge on commerce. That this is where it's all, so it's all about, you know, working hard. But you can see the people who have that spark in them that are willing to, you know, just do what it takes to get it done, and being tenacious and being able to, you know, suck it up, because sometimes it's not fun. Like sometimes it is legitimately a grind, and you have to be willing to work through that. You know, like Angelo, right? My son, like I picked him up last week, the perfect example. And he's like, gets in the car, he's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, here we go. He doesn't want to go to football. You know, he's like, that's it. And I'm like, what's up? He's like, oh, we've been practicing for the Memorial Day parade and my shoulders are hurting so bad. And I was like, okay,
You know, there's something to get out of it.
you know, and I was like, dude, you're going to football, man. You got to be able to grind it out. Like I can't teach work ethic. Work ethic comes as it goes, you know. But I was giving him this whole dissertation on you got to grind it out. You got to put the team in front of you and all that stuff. And then like I get him to football. I was like, oh, I didn't go to the gym today. Like, you know, and I'm like, put my money where my mouth is, and I grab one of the dogs and I go run a couple miles around town or whatever. But you know,
well, that's, I mean, owning your own business, I said, it's not for everyone. I knew that I would be good at it because, like I said, I've been very entrepreneurial in my whole life, but no one, if you're the boss, no one is going to make you do the work, right? So you have to be disciplined. You know, you are the only person you have to answer to. So, you know, but the trade-off to that is that I was able to, through the process of owning Rustic Wedding Chic for all those years, I also gave birth to all three of my children and was able to be, I mean, I never had a maternity leave longer than a week, which I regret. But if the company was going to continue to move forward and make money, I had to be the one producing content and pushing out social and selling ad deals. But I was able to have the trade-off of I went to every school event, you know, I was there with my kids, and you guys know how that is and how important that is. And so those were some of the trade-offs that I felt were okay, that I was willing to put in the hard work because I had some of the flexibility that was important to me.
Yeah.
No,
And I think
that's
that's one of like the biggest, and you hear a lot of people, you know, talking about that, like you know, I make my own hours, and it, you know, being an entrepreneur or owning your own business or whatever, however you want to put it, like it definitely, it has its, you know, the romantics of it. Like we were, you know, we were saying a little bit, like, it's lovely to say all those things, but you have to be dedicated. You have to keep yourself in check and be self-starter, like push yourself to execute all the things that you know that need to get executed, and have fun doing it and actually keep enjoying it. And I feel like a lot of things too, like, you know, not everyone who is an entrepreneur, like you were mentioning before, like now it's like part of college curriculums. Like it's just part of the reality of, you know, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be an entrepreneur. Okay, great. You know, but it's just weird to even say it out loud. But like, how, just because you want to be an entrepreneur doesn't mean that you're necessarily business savvy, right? Like it's not, you know, I was in agency. I'm a graphic designer. So that was my career. It still is my career, you know, but I'm for the past 8 years, I've been doing it on my own. I
Yeah.
started my own little boutique studio. So, but that doesn't mean that I knew what the heck I was doing when I left. Like I just took like that leap of faith and I'm like, all right. So I've had my own hiccups and things. But one thing that I've always like had in the back of my mind is like, oh my gosh, like I just launched myself into this thing and I'm sure that it could have been a much smoother ride, you know, if I had a little bit more business sense. So like in your mind, like how important is it when you go into you know, business for yourself or you start up something DIY to have a business plan, like a clear, like, you know what I mean? Like within 5 years, I want to achieve this or like this, da, 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 or like, you know, like
Yeah.
for all my avenues. And this is how, like, no,
It's overwhelming. Like I didn't go to business school, right? My major was history with a minor in women's studies. I have a graduate degree in organizational leadership, but I'm I hate business plans. And when I say it, some people are like, oh, and I'm like, no, I started a business. I figured out how I was going to make money. The business plan was written like years after we were successful. I was like, I was doing like morning talk shows about wedding trends. If they had known that, like, there's no business plan, right? But I will say what happened was as the company took structure and started to take its form of what it was going to look like, that's when I was able to say, I think, okay, I can monetize this. I can sell ad placements. We can do display ads. We can do sponsored content. When our social footprint became so huge, people wanted us to, you know, advertising through social. So I'm a big proponent of like, just do it. Like just start somewhere, even if it's just a name of a company you like, and then you create a website. I think so many entrepreneurs take too long trying to put together the perfect business plan and revenue and what the team would look like in the structure. And I think it just holds you back from jumping in and starting it. And you might have to course correct because you didn't maybe do everything correctly the way, you know, how do you set up your LLC, the tax structure, all those things can be changed once you get to, you know, the point where the company needs those changes. But I'm a big proponent of like, that's great. You should totally start that company. That sounds like an awesome idea. What can you do with that? So I'm almost like allergic to the idea of like a formal business plan.
So I love that because I'm a big, cause like I have friends who are like, oh, you know, we're just not ready to have a baby or we're not ready to get married. We don't have enough money. We don't have, and I'm like, dude, there's never going to be enough money. There's never going to be enough time. You just have to jump into it. So with that said, like, do you think there's a difference between an entrepreneur and a business person? Right?
Yes.
It has to be. Because like when I think business person, I think biz ops, right? I think people that look at numbers and they do that because like
they're very calculated. I don't know.
it is like so like working for like the last couple of years I've been working for ad agencies, right? And this past gig I was working at, like I had to work directly with biz ops. And like the way that I looked at business versus the way that they looked at business were completely different. And to your point, when I got the job through networking, entrepreneurial mind, willing to grind it out, willing to do this, willing to do that. So as a salesperson or a business developer, I live in gray area all day long, right? There is no definitive anything. It's just, I got to do what I got to do and I have to get in front of people and I have to figure that out. And when I was reporting to the head of biz ops, well, Chris, you made 7,500 calls this month and you didn't leave a single message, but your counterpart did. Why?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was none of your business. Making the phone calls, I decide whether or not I'm going to leave a message. Why are you hung up on that? It doesn't even, it's irrelevant to the entire process. Did I produce this month? Yes. Then that's all we need to talk about. That's all that matters, right? So
yeah, no, I think to your point about there's like more of a business person who goes on to create like a startup where there's an entrepreneur. So the business person looks at and says, there's a hole in the market here based on this data and the money I'm seeing, everything else. I'm going to go create a company that fills that hole that I think is a great idea. An entrepreneur is someone says, I have an amazing idea. they don't maybe even take the time to see if they have competition or who it's going to serve. I didn't look at the wedding space and say, there is a hole in the market for rustic wedding inspiration. I'm going to go fill it. I came at it from a perspective of, I'm struggling to find this information myself. I'm sure somebody else is too. I'm driven from a place of passion. I'm just going to create this. And that passion is going to lead to profit at some point. What that looks like, I don't know yet. So I think there's two different sides of that, with a business person who maybe is more calculated with what they're starting, when and how, and an entrepreneur who just goes, okay, I've got this thing and I'm going to do something with it.
For sure.
And so you had also mentioned that, Rustic Wedding Chic at some point evolve or open the doors for you to also write some books. So tell us about that. Like, what was your experience? You mentioned multiple books.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, in the end, up to now, and I would love to write a book in the business world, like very close to what I'm doing now. So I'm trying to figure that idea out. But I've written 6 books, and it was
We
for
will put all of them down, and we'll link out to all of them.
For sure.
for a person who struggled through every English class from elementary school through high school, right? I was way more interested in like history and geography, and like the fact that I've written 6 books would shock every single English teacher I've ever had in my life. But what I realized in the first process was, one, the wedding book planning experience world is all about beautiful pictures, and then my really ideas and tips and thoughts. And so it wasn't like creating, of course, like a novel. So in 2011, every business marker is based on how many kids I had at the time. It's
2? No.
so I'm always like, I know Jack was a baby when I was writing my first book, and he was born in 2011. So like every business milestone is like, I know somebody was born, or I was doing something with some kid. But yeah, so I was lucky enough to be connected with a publisher, Gibb Smith, who was fantastic. They produce a lot of coffee table books, not really a lot in the wedding space, but a lot in like home decor, and like, so they really, like, florists had beautiful books with them. So we worked together and crafted this idea, and they were like, how fast can you get it done? And I was like, yeah, the faster, the better. I don't want to wait 2 years for this to be published. And it was important to me at the time, because there wasn't as many blogs and media companies. I wanted to be online and offline. I knew that was important for the business. So we wrote the first book, which was called Rustic Wedding Chic. The second book was Barn Weddings, because in 2014, 13, 14, whenever that came out, barn weddings were this crazy scene. The next book was the Rustic Wedding Handbook, which was more of like a DIY, how to do your own. And then we went on, the most recent one came out in 2019, which was called Modern Romantic Weddings. So it's been an interesting journey.
Do you feel like there's still a possibility to continue doing books and evolving it as interest and the opportunity allows, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I liked working with a publisher because I didn't know what I was doing. I know now there's so many people do self-published books and have a lot of success. I would love to take what I'm doing with my individual female-founded clients that I have in like this business coaching space and advising space, and bring that information to people who are not at the point where they can invest in, the sort of services that I have. What that looks like, how I do it, I don't know yet, but it is definitely rolling around in my brain.
Do you find, like, obviously you've been busy, like all the stuff that you've done has been like, I don't want to say tedious, but like, it certainly it's involved. Yeah, it takes a lot of your time. So how, what is your take on like taking a beat, taking breathers between each of these, like, let's say for you, like starting Rustic Wedding Chic and moving that forward, and then like these book thing, like, did you find that it was necessary for you to like pause on one a little bit to be able to work on another? Do you feel like it's like you cannot take those gaps, or like what is your process when working on multiple large projects at the same time that do work together, but
Yeah. I'm a really good multitasker, that's without question, but I never had the opportunity, the content and the revenue and the traffic from Rustic Wedding Chic online platform had to continue to be produced and had to continue to keep the company going, which also fueled book sales, right? So it's like they went hand in hand. So I would work really hard on Rustic Wedding Chic and then would maybe take afternoons to just work on the book, right? And so it was definitely a lot going on, and creating a book is very difficult. You need, a ton of pictures, and it's a lot of organization of the photographers and getting, information and getting them to sign off on the rights to their pictures. So there's a lot. I never realized how fast I was running on all cylinders all the time until January of 2023, when I left David's Bridal after they had acquired Rustic Wedding Chic in 2020, that I didn't realize I had not stopped moving from the time I created Rustic Wedding Chic at 26, that it was just constant. I had moments of feeling of burnt out and I'm tired and how am I going to do this? But I was still so in love with the company that I had founded that it never felt so bad that I had to get out. I will say that people ask me all the time, well, how did you know it was the right time to sell the company? And we had been approached over the years by, kind of those names in the wedding digital space that you would totally just expect. And we entertained some thoughts. It wasn't the right time. The deals weren't what I was hoping for, like that sort of thing. But I never felt desperate. It wasn't like I was like, I have to get out. But there came a time, and the only way I can explain it is as if Rustic Wedding Chic was that child who needs to go to college, but instead they're like living in your basement.
Right.
If they don't go on to their next phase of life, they're not going to continue to flourish, right? Like in Rustic Wedding Chic had gotten so big, and the traffic, we had millions and millions of monthly readers, and we were still a very small, lean team, that I started to kind of put out some feelers and craft an idea of what it would be like to have it, be acquired, and what would that look like. And we got close with one company that really, in the end, the deal didn't go through. And I was heartbroken, to be honest, because I loved their leadership team. I thought it was the right place for Rustic Wedding Chic. I think it probably would have done very well. But the way, life works, right time probably wasn't for them, for us. And, it ended up in a great spot where I knew that Rustic Wedding Chic could benefit somebody like a David's Bridal, where they interact with the bride at 9 months, and Rustic Wedding Chic readers were 12 and 14 months before their wedding. So it would move a retailer up funnel with the bride. And also, making money in digital media is hard. So if you can sell them a wedding dress and sell more people your wedding dress or your whatever it was going to be able to make money that way and not have to rely solely on just the digital ad sales of things.
Like, can we just we just glazed over the fact that, oh, by the way,
yeah,
Bridal, like everyone and their mother knows David's Bridal. Like, how did that relationship kind of, come about? Was it via your own research, or did they reach out to you? How did that?
Yeah, I knew I didn't want to have to go with a broker. They make you, we'll help you put together these big decks and packages and we'll get the right buyer. And then they take a lot of your money. And I had kind of said, let me see what I can do. I've worked with a lot of wedding companies over the years. I kind of knew a couple of people on their social team at David's Bridal, but no one on the executive level or anything. And I created a list of 7 or 8 companies. This is January of 2020. And I'm like, I'm just going to start reaching out. I had put together with the help of an advisor, our company one sheet, kind of what our valuation was, those sort of things. And I was like, well, I'll just start taking some meetings and see where it goes. And had some nice calls, but I emailed the CEO of David's Bridal, and I got an email back a couple of days later. It was like, would you be willing to meet with me and my team in New York? It was the beginning of March. No, we had no idea that the world was going to shut down the next week.
Yeah, that's wild.
Right.
That's
yeah.
complaining about coming in from Peru late February, walking into a shit show, and you're like, yeah, just
So
I mean, I remember meeting in Manhattan, and like the next week we got an email from school that said they were going to be like shutting down for 2 weeks. So we obviously didn't know what the implications of COVID would be, especially in the wedding world. But I think at that time, David's had a lot of new executives to their team. They had a new vision for the company. They were looking for other people who had some expertise in the wedding space. Clearly I did. And I was kind of just like open to the fact that I was like, I'm not a tired entrepreneur. I'm not a burnt out entrepreneur. I would be willing to, if Rustic Wedding Chic is acquired by your company, I'd be happy to come over and continue to run it. Or, my experience in the wedding world is like so vast that I could do a lot of different things. And it happened quickly, and, a lot of back and forth and legal work and things, but, the deal that came to be, they were very happy to acquire Rustic Wedding Chic. And in that process, they offered me, a very large executive job. And I was, for the first time kind of in my career, very scared, because I was like, I've never done this before. Never worked a day in corporate America. I didn't even know how to work Outlook. I'm a Gmail girl, and I was like totally scared off. But I will say the confidence of being a founder, being a CEO, creating something from nothing, you're like, hey, let's go. Let's see how it goes. So I joined the David's team. It was a weird time because it was COVID and everybody was working from home, and there was no sense of like really being part of such a large organization. But, people would say to me, you just sold, or, your company was acquired by the largest retailer of bridal in the world. Like, what does that mean to you? And I was like, I'm so busy. I never had the time to digest. Like, it wasn't normal. Like, I didn't just sell it to another media group or something. So sometimes when my kids are acting up, I'm like, hey, my company was acquired by the largest bridal retailer in the world, guys. Listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. But it's, I think at the time you're busy. You just keep going. You just keep moving, and so I will forever be grateful that that relationship happened, that it worked. I was very happy for my 2.5 years at David's, very happy that it also ended, and I was ready to move on back to working for myself.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue, because it's, now with all your experience and exactly what you said to your kids, like, look.
And they still think they know more than you anyway, right? Like,
Totally.
You obviously, and the reason, guys, that we've been talking about all this stuff and all of Maggie's experience in the business world, in her business world, starting her own business and everything, is because now you've kind of morphed it into a strategic advisor, business coach, business, right? For yourself. So tell us about what you're doing now. Like, what is like the big adventure for Maggie now?
Yes. So it's been a little bit, I had some downtime in between leaving David's and what do I want to do. And over all the years that I was running Rustic Wedding Chic, I always had some people asking for like consulting or business coaching, because they're like, how are you doing this? And my biggest pain point over all those years was I was really a solo entrepreneur, didn't have a C-suite, I would bounce ideas off my husband at the dinner table, and he'd be like, that sounds great, but I have no basis of knowing if it's going to work or not. So I didn't have a board of directors. I didn't have anybody to really bounce those ideas off of and continue to be inspired and grow. And I think there's a lot of solo entrepreneurs who feel that way, where it's hard. Like you're making decisions for your company, but you don't know if it's the right thing. How do I do that? Networking, all of those things. And so I really felt like it was the right thing for me to work with female founders or, female owned businesses, because I understand the challenges, especially where it comes into like work-life balance, having children, all of those things. And so I slowly reached out to people who had reached out to me over the years, and it kind of just snowballed into like, I have amazing clients now. And I worked really, 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 really hard to make sure that my business coaching is accessible from a financial standpoint, because I was so disappointed years and years ago. There was a firm in Manhattan was like, oh, this is what we do, and you're part of our network, and we coach you. And then it was like an $8,000 a month, service. And I was like, if Rustic Wedding Chic had that to burn, I'd build out a C-suite, like it was. So it was my biggest frustration being a female founder on my own. And so I'm very fortunate now that I get to work with a wide variety of founders, a wide variety of, females, entrepreneurs who are in different stages of their journey. But it really makes me, I'm back to that feeling at Rustic Wedding Chic where I'm like, I wake up every day super happy and excited to do what I'm doing.
Cool. And what we can obviously vouch for, and just through friendship with you, is what you're going to get honesty. I think like that's one of like the things that Chris and I always talk about, is sometimes you're just not, even as a business coach or someone that is providing advice, you're not necessarily always going to have the answers right away, but you're going to help your whoever you're coaching, you're going to help them find the answer or figure it out through your expertise, Yeah. And I think that having that honest relationship with people and trusting them to guide you and to help you, figure out what's right for you and your business is imperative. Us, like as small business owners, I feel like we're always like kind of like, hitting those walls and asking these questions, because like we're not business majors. We're not like, not our, necessarily our world in certain aspects. So it's very easy to get lost in the sauce and like feel like, am I, question yourself constantly. And it's always helpful to have someone in your corner who's a friend and who is helping you, organize all the things that are, those ongoing lists that we all have in every aspect of our life. When it comes to business, right? It's like it becomes, I feel like, for me anyway, I feel like the business side of it becomes even more stressful, because it's how I'm providing for my family.
There's
right?
a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of like, that's why like I'm just a fan of forward motion.
Yeah.
And I get lost in the sense of like I'll outwork anyone. Like if I'm like on a sales team, I'll make the most phone calls. I don't care. I will outwork anybody. I never finished my 4-year degree. So I always feel like I have to outwork anybody anyway, because that's always like one of the questions that has always hung over my head is, well, you didn't finish your 4 years. Why is that?
Who cares?
Didn't. Who cares? But I'll outwork anyone on your team all day long. So like with Pal, that's why I'm always just like forward motion, just keep moving. As long as I hate sports references, but as long as the ball's moving down the field, in some capacity, whether it's at a half a yard or more, at least there's movement, and where there's movement, there's
forward movement, forward, it doesn't always have to be forward. People say, oh, forward progress. I'm like, well, sometimes it's not always progress. It's just moving forward. And somebody once said to me, in business, even if you fall flat on your face, you've moved forward. Like, you didn't fall backwards, right? And so I'm like, I get that. And I think I was so hesitant to kind of call it a business coach, because there's like this ick factor. Like if you go on TikTok, people are like, I'm a business coach and buy my course and you'll make $10,000. I'm like, I'm never selling courses. I'm not putting like that. It's just not, it's different. So the way I work with clients, they're at all different parts in their journey. I was meeting with a local prospective client yesterday who's just starting her journey and is looking for accountability and a second eyes on things. And am I marketing this right way? And I have one client who's on the complete other end of the spectrum, who we're crafting her exit strategy and, like putting together a list of who could be a potential buyer for her company. So I really get to see both ends of the spectrum and everybody in between.
I just want to call out that I love that you're doing that, because that wouldn't have even fell into my brain in terms of like, who do you go to for an exit strategy out of this situation? And I have to give you a million credit into the world, is that you took this on so like on your own and just went with your gut. And people like, I think that's hard for people in general to trust their gut, right? Because when it's like Paula mentioned, like everything that, everyone on this Zoom, right? Like everything that we do is in regards to our family, how we provide. And you're like, you question yourself all day long. And if you don't have someone to, turn to and say like, is this a great idea. And there's sometimes like Paolo asks me stuff about design, and like I'm a creative person, but like I'm not a designer, right? Like so I do the same thing. Like sounds cool, like but like there's an old saying that Italian people, when you ask an Italian person for advice, they'll give you advice, but then they'll stop and go, well, what the F do I know?
Yeah, yeah,
They don't want any part. If it doesn't work, they don't want any part of that, and it's true. It's like
yeah, but it's interesting because like each one of my clients right now, they need something different, and I can service all those different areas. One of them just needs accountability. She is struggling to post on social content, so we've come up with calendars, right? You need that person who's going to be there for the accountability. And then there's others who are crushing it in business, right? Like they have fantastic revenue, like going viral all the time for social, but they're looking for something else of like, their team is junior and they don't have anyone who's an executive level to run ideas by. So it's nice too to be able to work in a wide variety of stages with all my clients.
So important to always remember that, the learning process and the growing process, just in my mind, it never ends. Like I'm a graphic designer, but I did not go to school for graphic design.
Yeah.
I fell into it, out of like, oh, I need work out of college, and I guess I'll intern there and I'll do that for a little bit until I figure out my starving artist plan over here. You know what I mean? Like, and it just kind of morphed, and I like fast forward 20 years later, right? Like whatever. And it's like, I have to stop myself sometimes and be like, Paola, like stop and see what you did, because you basically taught yourself, moved up the chain, what I mean? Became a successful, creative director and own your own business. Like,
well, we don't
credit and trust yourself to learn, to evolve, and great things can happen. And like, it doesn't have to be like, I went to school for this, or I did that, so I must do this. Like, you have to be, I feel, almost open and willing to see where the road takes you a little bit, Yeah.
I have a client who is so great. She said to me recently when we were having like the first call, like, is this going to be like the right relationship with her? And she was like, I don't want you to like outline my next 20-25 year plan. She was like, I want to just talk and see where like the breadcrumbs kind of just go. And I was like, I love that. I have some clients who we are outlining their goals for 2025. That's what they need from a structure standpoint. I have other clients who just want to connect and talk about things that they're doing, and it's, or how hard it is to be a boss and run a company, right? Like that's not always like the first thing that comes to, if you're an entrepreneur and you hire staff, being a boss is hard, right? And so, but I'm a big believer in just like putting it out there, saying what you want. Some people call it manifesting, you can call it whatever you want. But if you don't put it out there and say, some people try to keep it all in until it's like the perfect moment to announce it.
Yes.
I'm like, you know what? You're going to miss an opportunity by not telling your neighbor that, this is what you're doing now, because they're like, oh, I have this friend and I could connect you. So I'm just a big believer in like, put it out there, talk to people, make connections, and, good things happen in business that way.
Well, as an oversharer in every aspect of my life, I couldn't agree more. No, but I am like, I really couldn't agree more. Like I'm a huge, one thing that like, I think we grabbed out of COVID, because COVID definitely like rocked our world. Thank God, not from a health perspective, but definitely from a financial perspective, it put us in a position in life where we've never been. Mm-hmm. And we had to really like pivot, and that's where faith comes in, right? Like that's where you have to be like, okay, like, I'm gonna manifest this, I'm gonna do what I need to do to get whatever done. And like through manifestation and through all of those things, like we learned and experienced like a magnitude of things, and nothing extraordinary, but it was always just enough to get us to where we need to get for the following month, and so on and so forth.
I'm a big believer in like, it's not something that has come to me naturally. I've had to learn the process. The idea of like positive thinking and the positivity going into a situation. It's actually, I've had to work really, really, really hard over the years, especially being a business owner, that, okay, you know, we are going to reach these goals. We are going to be successful, you know, and sometimes what changes is like, what is success? Well, to some people, it's that your company made $1 million a year in revenue. I remember starting out, I had a number in my mind. I was like, if I could pay myself that number and run Rustic Wedding Chic, right? Like just that to me was success. And then as the things grew and the company grew, I was able to redefine success many, many, many times over. But you have to start somewhere with the positivity.
And for me, like it's not that I'm a negative person, but I'm naturally a pessimist. So I have to every day I have to train myself to think positive, right? And that is it's for me, it is an incredible challenge. But the results that come from that are extraordinary. And like I've sold Paula onto this idea because it's hard, right? Like it's just, but it's like, no, but that's like, again, like that's where I'm like, just like stay positive because it will work out. It might not work out the way you necessarily want, but it's going to work out. And if you stay in the fight and you really believe it, to your point, and you're living proof of that, that great things can happen. And it's just not going to, I think we're all kind of brought up, especially for like our generation, with this idea that everything has to be perfect and you have to go to college and then you find the person you're going to marry and then you have a family and you have a great career and you live this American dream. But like, really, what is in my idea, and especially like, my idea of the American dream is like, you got to put the work in, but the results from hard work can be certainly extraordinary. And success doesn't mean you have $1 billion in your bank account. Like I always beat myself up on terms of like where I'm at right now in my life and at my age. And then like my very best friends are like, yeah, but dude, like you have a great wife, children, you live in Fairfield, which is arguably one of the safest towns in the country, and so on and so forth. Like that's success too, Chris. And I'm like, yeah, all right. You know what? Perspective is key, because when you're when you're struggling, like you're always kind of in this space of like, this sucks and life is this and this and this. And then like for me, like I pivot and I'm like, all right, I'm struggling with A or B or C, but like there's someone in a hospital that wishes they had my struggles, right? Like their struggles if someone's dying, there's no end game. Your situation is what it is. But like in business and in stuff like that, like there's end games and there's outs and there's success. And like for me, every day is a new opportunity to be better and for something extraordinary to happen.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of clients that what they struggle with is that when you're an entrepreneur or you run your own business, no one is there patting you on the back all the time, saying you've done a good job. This is great. Look what you've accomplished. And so I have some clients when we meet and they're like, oh, well, we didn't grow X amount over like we wanted to last month. I'm like, but let's look at what you did do. Oh, you grew on social. You were able to accomplish this, but that's hard and so that's why a lot of my conversations with my clients are about that. And I had someone very close to me in life once say something that I remember and talk about and share with people and remind my children of it. If everybody around you put their problems in a pot in the center, you would take your own, right? Because it really, when you start to see what everybody else is dealing with in life, right? You realize, okay, my troubles are not that bad. I'd rather have mine than somebody else's. And then the perspective of like defining success, both as a business owner and as a person, that success is what you want it to be and not what the external world says this is what success should be.
That's hard in social media. Like I was having this conversation yesterday with someone. It's just like you log on to the Instagrams and the TikToks and the Facebooks and even LinkedIn, and it's you don't see there's always those like memes and stuff of like, you see the person standing on the mountain, but you don't see the load of shit that is underneath that mountain to climb up. Right. And like, we all live in that and we're all guilty of it. You see that and you see these people and everyone looks like they have the most perfect life in the world. But the reality is that we're all struggling to some component, and struggle is subjective to the person.
Yeah.
And until you recognize that, it's hard because you get into that mode of like, oh, like, why is life so hard? But there's always going to be someone out there that wishes they had your own problems, because things could certainly, I don't know. At the end of the day, I look at it this way. I tell Paula, no matter how tough things get in life, we're still probably 60% better off than most people in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there was a lot of, I used to feel when Rustic Wedding Chic was like, at its very height, so like maybe right before COVID, where I was doing a lot of press things and on morning talk shows and, in magazines, and doesn't it all look glamorous? And I could feel certain relationships, people, acquaintances, that there was like a tinge of like this jealousy of like, oh, well, she's got everything she wants. And look at her, she's on like, the morning talk shows. And I'd be like, do you know how many nights I was awake trying to figure out, well, if the company doesn't do this much next month, then how do I, where can we grow? And like that they just think, oh, it just was like this overnight success or this perfect line. And I found a picture once online that it was like, this is what you think success looks like. And it's like the perfect, growth arrow. But really, it was like all these scribbles. And like I started and stopped 1,000 different projects. I had great ad meetings that they promised they were going to buy $50,000 worth of ad space and never ghosted me, So there's a lot of that too. And I think that's why when you're a small business owner, you really have to always either surround yourself or be confident knowing I'm pushing the company forward every day. I'm doing those small things. I can pat myself on the back and say, this is all worth it. I'm doing good stuff. I'm doing good work.
There's nothing wrong with that. Like, and it's also, I think as entrepreneurs, we're our own worst enemy. And like Pala for sure is her own worst enemy. She beats herself up to death, and I'm constantly being there, but like, you've accomplished a lot. And like, even with like In a Fairfield Minute, and we're still like this small baby thing or whatever. Like as a result of COVID, like I had to go back into corporate America. She's been doing In a Fairfield Minute completely on her own, on top of her design business, on top of being a mother with kids who, like most kids, want mom and stuff like that. So like, dude, like give yourself credit. And like, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had a billion different ideas. I've started, to your point, I stopped, I've done all these things. But I never forget, like a friend of mine was like, hey man, like I just have to give you credit. And I had started an ice cream truck, right? This is like a billion years ago.
Ice cream truck.
It was a lot of fun, to be honest with you. But my point is that he's like, dude, you did it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, you said you were going to start an ice cream truck and you did it. Like I would just never do that. It would be too scary for me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like I never thought of that. Like,
it is funny. People will say to me, oh my gosh, you must have been like so crazy, so brave to start a company. And like, I'm a type of girl, I cannot get on a roller coaster. I have huge anxiety about flying. Like I avoid risk at all possibility. doesn't make sense to people that who view being an entrepreneur as so risky, because to me, it just felt like my very safest, coziest place that I could live is entrepreneurship. Which if you ask someone, well, why do you shy away from things that are scary or risk? I'd be like, well, because I don't like that. But entrepreneurship to other people is the scariest place that they could ever be.
Oh my God.
This is
for sure.
probably like the funnest that I've had personally. I feel like I have found within a Fairfield Minute, being an entrepreneur in that sense, starting this particular business has been the most rewarding. And honestly, the space that I felt the most comfortable in, because I get to literally be myself. I show up as myself. I feel like I'm able to do the things and help people. Like I came to realize like I really enjoyed being of service to others, and that was my space, and making people smile was my goal. Like the work was just fun, and it is fun, and it's easier, and it's less pressure in that sense. I don't know how to, like, it's because I'm enjoying it, because it's something that I believe in, because it's something that's coming from a place of passion and love and honesty. Like it's not fake, when you're doing something that is truly something that you're passionate about, it then there's no conflict in that sense of like, am I doing the right thing or for the right reasons, or I don't know. There's definitely a comfort there for me. But I feel like the one place that I did struggle was always the asking for help. I feel like it's very easy, at least for a person like myself, to internalize things, wanting to always like, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of all of it. Like, and that level of pressure can also be paralyzing.
Yeah.
So that in that realm of being an entrepreneur, I feel like that's where I really I really struggled. And I remember it was probably a couple of years ago, I read a book called The Art of Asking. You know, it's not a business book by any means, but it's a wonderful book. And literally, what you walk away with is like, you know, like, it's okay to ask for help. You know,
Yeah.
you don't have to be, yes, as an entrepreneur, you wear all the hats. Like you always talk about that. You wear all the hats. You have to be willing to do this, this, and that. And but it doesn't mean that you're alone. And it doesn't mean that it's not okay to ask
Yeah.
for help. You know what I mean? Get someone
For sure.
who knows what they're doing in this particular area of business
Yeah.
or what it is you're doing.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of clients who deal with when you're, especially if you're a founder or if you're the CEO of the company, whatever, you have what I call is option shock. Like they go to work every day and you've got 800 emails you could answer. You could, update all the social platforms. You should be selling ads. It's option shock because you have to do it all. And it's like, where do I put my time, my effort? Where does my brain go? And it's a lot to try to unpack, but I've kind of found some methods that I think really help my clients figure out there's time to do it all, but it seems overwhelming, but we can put a plan together so that everything gets done in the company gets done successfully without you feeling that stress of I have to be doing everything at once to move the company forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
Wait,
go ahead.
No. Mine's kind of, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, I know that we're not like the big fans of the business plan, but like, where do you see Maggie Lord company or consulting going? Like, how is this like kind of like we're gonna just roll with this for a little bit?
Yeah, working at David's Bridal was a great experience. I'm glad I had that, but I knew going into it and I knew leaving it that I am not a corporate girly. It just is not. It's literally like trying to put, something that's round in like a square. Like it just not gonna work.
Yeah, that's the world
all the
that's the world I live in. Like I am forced in, I mean, I am forced into corporate America because I have no other choice, right? Like, and I'm not that person who's like, this is gonna sound really bad, especially because it's I'm gonna be on YouTube. But like, I'm not willing to, like, I live my life with integrity, and I like everything I do is based off of it being integrity and honor and being just a good person. And sometimes in that space, in order to advance, and I'm not obviously not at David's Bridal, but in my experience, you got to be a little bit crude and such. And I'm just not that guy either.
Yeah. No, it's hard. I think that was a lot of what I learned in corporate America, that like titles really matter to people. And if you were a manager, you just focus on getting to senior manager. And what was after that? And I was like, oh my God, I've been the CEO and a janitor at Rustic Wedding Chic and everything in between. Like the titles and that was all new to me. And I take from my 2.5 years at David's, I met a lot of really interesting, smart people. I learned things from corporate America that I never would have known. I apply them to my business. I help apply them to like my client's business. So for that experience, I say thank you. It also reinforced that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And, I'd rather run Maggie Lord and Company than be offered a CEO job and make, a lot of money from a big company, because that just, doesn't really work for me. So I have a lot of clients that I'm working with now. I would love to add more. I eventually down the line would love to bring in other women to Maggie Lord and Company that would be able to consult and work with clients in areas of expertise that I don't. I brought in someone last year on a short-term basis who was helping. She's an email specialist and strategist. And that's not really an area, like I don't build out drip campaigns, right? But that's what one of my clients needed. So in addition to being her coach and working with her, she was able to work with this other person to be able to build out what she needed. So that would be my long-term goal, is to continue to add great female founders that I'm working with, be able to continue to help advise, on a lot of projects and things, but then also be able to bring in women to Maggie Lord and Company that have expertise in areas that I don't.
Cool. Would you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert who's forced to be an extrovert.
I only ask that because that's literally how I am.
Yeah.
Outside of business, like what do you like to do? Like what's your idea of just like a perfect Saturday?
You know, I have 3 boys, they all play sports, and I enjoy being at their games and watching them play because they all love it so much. So like our best family time is sitting at a baseball game. Travel basketball season is like my family's jam. I love it. I love the busyness. I love my kids. They love playing sports, and it brings them such joy that I love being there and watching them. So I have some mom friends who are like, oh, we have 3 games on, this weekend. And I'm like, I've got 3 and I can't wait.
That would be Pala. That is not. I mean, fortunately, our kids don't play like sports to that level, but like,
One who's like, oh, the girls softball team's practicing on the park right over. Let's go watch. And he's like, we're weirdo. Like,
I remember like when like my sister would call Pal and I'd be like, oh, the girls have a dance recital in like some random town in Maine at 9 a.m. on Saturday. Do you want to go? And I'm like,
no.
I would rather shovel shit in 100-degree
Yeah.
than do that. I love my nieces more than anything, but no, but
Yeah.
one of my favorite things to ask people when they come on the podcast is like, what like book recommendations? Like, what are your favorite books to read? Do you have anything that like your go-to that you read every year or anything like that?
I feel like I'm just getting to a stage where I'm getting back to having enough time to read what I want to read. I was sitting on the couch not that long ago on like a weekend reading a book, and my son was like, are you feeling okay? You've been sitting on the couch I'm like, yeah, I'm reading. It's called relaxing. Like, you guys haven't seen me do that in a long time. So I mean, I guess right now I'm getting into like, the summer like beach read sort of thing. My youngest is 6, and so I've been reading a lot of books, like chapter books to him at night, which is like really fun, right? And so like we've outgrown like the Berenstain Bear world, but now we're like doing these small chapter books, which is really nice. But I would certainly like to read more. So that is on my list of things to try to accomplish.
Now, do you prefer Kindle or actual book?
I like actual books.
Same for both of us as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a Kindle as well because for travel, I think it's been rather than have like 4 books with you. But I like the idea. I like holding a book. I like the smell of a book and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
I agree. I also think, I mean, it's really interesting. Like we still get the New York Times delivered because I want my kids to like, if it's just sitting on the table, like sometimes they'll start to like look through it. But if I'm reading it behind my phone or my computer, they actually have no idea that I'm reading a newspaper, right? I could be doing a million different things. So I like the act of actually reading in front of them, and so that they can see that that's what I'm doing. I'm not just trolling TikTok.
Yeah, I remember like in
Correct.
middle school and high school, like I used to love like I forget what class I was in, but they would always have the USA Today on our desks,
Oh, yeah.
and that was like one of my favorite things. I used to love just I don't know. There's something very special about a newspaper.
I agree.
Oh yeah.
How we started. I know.
Well,
Aw.
we've taken up a lot of your time, and we are super, super appreciative of you coming on and chatting with us and telling us about your story and what you're doing next.
Well, I appreciate it. I've loved chatting with you guys. I like, the fact that we met all those many years ago, and then COVID and everything else, and that we reconnected. And so it makes me happy to be able to share my experience in business and what I'm doing now. And, it's just been lovely to kind of rekindle our friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
And just like
awesome.
congratulations, dude, on like
Thank you.
it's so amazing. No, really, like it's incredible.
Thank you. It's funny. I think as business owners, we don't often take the time to like look at what you've done. Cause like, I'm always like, well, I've got to do this and I've got to do this and the kids and this and this, so sometimes when people, they congratulate you, I tell a lot of my clients, like, accept that, take that in. Like, yes, it's okay to be congratulated on good things that you do in business.
I get uncomfortable with all that stuff. Happy birthdays, I'm like, oh.
But thanks again for your time. Thanks again for sharing all your experiences with our audience. And we are sure that only amazing things to come.
For
So
sure.
thanks so much, Maggie, and have an awesome rest of your day.
And bingo
Thank-
agreed.
Bingo.
It's good to talk to you. Bye.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.